Hello and welcome to part 5 of my deconstruction of my discussion on metaphysics with Stefan Molyneux on his show on Free Domain. And this is the last part, hopefully, presumably, there's about 20 minutes left. And this is after the good 1 hour where we discussed, as I said, metaphysics. And now he has muted me. This is going through Telegram, which is an app or application you can use for communicating and chatting, and apparently also record live sessions and so on. And this is also a reason why my audio seems to be very muffled. Either there's something wrong with how things are transmitted through Telegram, and or Molyneux is doing something to make listeners sound poorly in order to make them look like they're weird. They have a, whatever, right? I have no way of checking it, but when I think about it, it seems that there are a lot of people who have bad audio on his show, right? Okay, I don't know, but it's just, I don't know, right? It's just weird because it's the same microphone I'm using here, and it's significantly better audio here than it is on the recording that Stefan Molyneux, while his microphone sounds perfect, right? So it's not like it just makes me think maybe he has done something that makes sure that when it records in his end of things, it starts to the listener. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just conspiracy, right? It's just weird. It really sounds bad, my audio, right? It gets better during the show, also because I am relocating myself during the discussion, right? Okay, so maybe we should just get it. Well, maybe I should mention before I head into it that treating people like this, just muting them out of the discussion without saying any, without agreement or anything, just, okay, now I'm going to mute this dude and then I'm going to talk, right? That is, I mean, if he thinks that he's some kind of virtue god, right, on how to behave and the art of the argument and all that, right? Why would he do something like this, right? I mean, it's sort of, I'm looking for a particular word. It makes it feel to the listener as if my part in that discussion is insignificant. It's like, okay, now I'm going to mute it. Oh, I'm going to keep talking. It's like it's completely natural, right? It's like, no, that's just what you do. If you don't want to talk anymore, you just mute people and then, right? And don't give them a chance to, refute or argue or finalize their arguments or anything like that, right? Make a final statement of some kind, or, plug each other's channels or whatever could be a fair way to end the discussion, right? No. It's just like, well, I'm just muting you. Yeah, and keep talking like nothing happened, right? And that sends a signal that, well, listeners on his show, they're just weird noises that you talk to, right? It's not an individual you have to treat like, as he says, reality, and it's so beautiful, and it's, yeah, but he treats us as if there's only him, right? He treats listeners, at least at times, as if they're not even existing, as if he's working in a purely subjective world, right? So his actions point in direction that if necessary, he doesn't give a shit about the art of the argument or a decent philosophical discourse, anything like that, right? And it does just, it shows a lack of format. It shows a lack of, after having, manipulated and gaslighted and moving goalposts and, thrown around terms without defining and, shouting and, for 1 hour while I was trying to come back to some kind of decent discussion, he is the guy muting me as if I'm the dude doing something that is sort of right. The format is screwed. And I don't understand why people don't say, well, I'm not going to donate or listen to a guy who treats people like this, right? He's dependent on having someone who can come on with his show. Now, I know he's behaved like this before, so I kind of knew what I was going in for. But I sort of hoped that I might illuminate to him that I could actually argue. But, that might be a problem because I might challenge his weird philosophy then, right? So he just have to get rid of me and use all these sophist tricks. And but muting and saying, okay, I'm stopping here would be one thing. But they'd keep talking for 20 minutes without the other guy being able to do something, right? I've seen it several times now when either he's saying, well, this guy wanted to talk to me, but he didn't show up, and now I'm going to, go into a narcissistic rage and, tell everybody how stupid it is that he didn't do this as he did half a year or a year back, right? Or like in Rationality Rules case, where he sort of interjected something after the fact into the video that, wasn't a part of the general discussion, right? So he goes, oh, I'm just interjecting this, and they also explain what was going on there to his listeners and plugging his books and what it was, right? That kind of behavior where the other part doesn't get a say in something while he's prepared to issue it, right? Without any, without asking the person who's participating in it whether or not they are satisfied with the product, right? No. That doesn't have to happen, right? He doesn't need to show that courtesy of any kind in that direction, right? He's trying to make sure that he's not going crazy and that he has a sufficient amount of flying monkeys on his show, on his narcissistic show, that can sort of protect him, help him protect his philosophy against attacks, right? So it's sort of paranoid, some underlying paranoia somewhere, right? Okay, let's head into the last 20 minutes, see how it goes.
Great conversation, great, enjoyable. Yeah, we agree. Now, there's a difference between what occurs within the mind and what's necessary.
See, he talks as if he's talking to me, right? He has muted me. I can listen, but I can't say anything, right? It's just like, okay, I'm just muting the guy, right? I mean, and I didn't hear, I think I mentioned that earlier, right? But I didn't hear that he said it. It was just, after you finished saying a good deal of things, you sort of relax a bit and trying to get a breath of fresh air and, get back into thinking mode. And you might not, if the other person says something just after you finished saying a good deal of things, you might not catch it. And even when he says he lowers his voice and say, okay, I'm muting. And then he heads on, right? Sort of, okay, you don't even hear it. Maybe that's deliberate, that it's almost like he has to say it, but he says so that a lot of people might not even sort of recognize that was what he just did, and then later sort of try to figure out what happened. Where did that guy go? Oh, he possibly just disappeared because he was too weak or something like that. I mean, it's pathetic, right? If you can't, you can't hold your own argument and you need to mute people out of a discussion, that says a lot about your abilities as a debater, right? He can argue his way through this. He has to destroy the discussion under the pretense that there's something wrong with the other person, right? That's sort of a sophist trick number 2 on the page 2 or something like that, right? So if you can't get it your way, you destroy the discussion and trying to blame the other person as being something like this or that or the other, right? And he has that upper hand because he's running the show. So you're sort of showing courtesy to him because you wouldn't go in and say, you should run your show like this or that or the other. But he's sort of the moderator of the show. And then he gets to do things that the other part in the partition, in the discussion does. So he is sort of using his power, which is also one of those things that he always said, you can judge people how they use power towards those who can't defend themselves against that power. So he's just an asshole then, right? So he likes to be an authority. He has to be dominant in order to dupe people into thinking that he has some kind of philosophical abilities. I don't think he has a lot of that, right? In fact, he has very little of it. Okay.
Out there in reality. So appreciate the conversation. It was a really good workout, and thank you very much for the discussion. And just to sort of reiterate the point, I'm not trying to sort of win the argument after the fact, but...
Oh, really? Oh, really? Why don't you let me talk then, right? Why don't you let me talk? No, we have to get rid of him. He's simply too good at arguing, right?
To reiterate the point, when I was a kid, I read...
Okay, so now we get all the anecdotes, and he is numbing people with his sort of anecdotes of this, that, and the other, right? Getting away from the core discussion here, right? So he just, I like to hear myself talk kind of situation we're in now, right?
I got these books, Reader's Digest condensed books. And in those books, they had, short versions of stories. I remember talking about this on the show many, many years ago. And I remember this very vividly when I was maybe 8 years old or so. I read a story, I can't remember what it is. And in it, a kid said, I'm hungry. And his mother said, then eat a kungry. It was K-U-N-G-R-Y. K-U-N-G-R-Y. So I said, I'm hungry. And she said, eat a kungry. Now, kungry doesn't exist and it's not a real thing. And I just remember being struck by that.
How do you know that it doesn't exist? Maybe she has made her own language, and they have agreed on a language where they know what that is, right? It could be a mix of a kangaroo and mulberry, raspberry, a kangaroo, right? So raspberry and kangaroo, fried in raspberry, right? That's a kangaroo. So it exists, right? How do you know it doesn't exist? That just does because it doesn't match your language, right? I know that it's possibly some kind of manipulation, but what does it take to know if something exists, right? That's the foundational question, or one of them at least. What do you mean when you say existing, right? You can't just do metaphysics by saying this exists and this doesn't exist, accept it, right? That's not how it works. You have to argue your way to it. You need to start with the foundation, the reduction base, which we, as far as I understood, had a fairly similar or fair agreement on was our experiences, right? That's a great starting point, in my opinion. And then we couldn't get on from there. Then he started to ask all sorts of weird questions and make statements and whatever, right? And then claiming existence and knowing and whatever, objectivity and all that. But you can't do that without arguing from this reduction base until he reaches that point where he has to talk about these things and how they relate back to that reduction base, right? Why would you need a description of a reduction base being, for instance, experiences, if you just jump into talk about, okay, then there are, books, and then there are this, and then there are that. So you don't need that if you already have the other thing. And then the question is, how did you get to that other thing, book, right? What's that? How do you get to it? Is it an experience? So you have to go back to the experience and define what you mean by a book, right? That's metaphysics. Apparently, he does not understand that.
It was a very interesting exchange. I think it was a pretty depressing book overall. And so he said, I'm hungry, so he wants real food. And she said, eat a made-up word. Eat something that doesn't exist.
But a made-up word, is that the same as it doesn't exist? New words appear, I mean, languages evolve, right? So I know what he means. But just because it's a word you don't understand, doesn't mean there's no existence behind it. And using a word that does understand doesn't imply that there must be an existence, right? Just uttering a sound doesn't create existence, right? The only thing that word does is referring to a concept, right? That you already have an idea, and your mind has, your cognitive abilities has been honed or trained to understand and refer to, right? If I say elephant, for instance, I suppose you can imagine that elephant from a conceptual point of view. But if I say gagalok, you would say, what the hell is that, right? You don't have any references. But just because you don't have any conceptual references doesn't mean there isn't an existence that is or isn't, right? An existence that is being referred to. So it's just these kind of arguments. I understand where it's going, but they are lousy arguments in a metaphysical discussion or a metaphysical philosophical dissertation of some kind, right?
Now, the kid in the book was very little, and he said something like, I can't eat a hungry, that doesn't exist. I'm hungry. I want some real food. So this little kid in this fictional story was able to differentiate between imagination and reality.
Just because there is no reality in language, right? There are references to something that could potentially be conceptualized by you, right? Like an elephant. If I say elephant, that doesn't mean there's existence of elephant somewhere, right? If I'm not experiencing elephant now, I can't say that an elephant exists or exists. It's unlikely that there aren't elephants when I have a concept of elephant. But if I don't experience elephant, I don't know elephant. And if I don't know elephant, I have no reference to its existence, right? Existence, that's some outside thing, right? X is outside. But my concept doesn't prove there's an outside thing that matches that concept. It's only when I experience that concept I call elephant in the real impression of it, right? Of which that concept is used to identify, I would say, within the experience or the screen of perception or whatever you want to call it. Then you can say that elephant exists. There's an elephant that matches my concept outside it's still inside because it is an experience inside, but it's one of those he calls objective, which I think is a bad term to use in this connection because it impinges on himself. It enforces, it impresses itself on him. He doesn't choose to have that impression, right? And I agree with that. That's a good differentiation. But it doesn't classify it as something outside, right? Just because you can't will it away or will it into existence, so to say, that doesn't mean that experience you have is actually outside. That experience is also inside, right? Where else could it be, right? But the connection might be, and you have to establish that axiomatically, in my opinion, that there's something that is behind that experience that it originates from, that is responsible for creating that experience, but that you can't get to. You can't get to the actual thing, right? The thing itself, as Immanuel Kant puts it, or put it, right? And that's fine, because it's the experience you have to work with. You don't care about the real thing, right? I wouldn't say the real thing. That's a stupid word to use. The thing itself. It actually is not a bad way to put it. The thing itself is sufficiently neutral in its expression, right? Okay, and this difference between that which he thinks is outside is still an experience inside. He can't get to that because he thinks that it's an attempt to make him crazy. So he will never get to that. He will never understand the problem that is inherent in that understanding he has. The paradox I'm referring to, right? So he'll never be a good philosopher. I mean, if I read philosophy or philosophical articles or whatever podcast, whenever people express these things, when I can hear that they suffer from a lack of understanding of this inherent paradox, I can sort of park them to the side and say they're not good philosophers because they haven't got the point, right? The penny hasn't dropped for them yet. Because as I maybe had told earlier in podcast, that I used to be on the other side, so to say. I used to be materialist, right? I used to believe that what I'm experiencing was the actual outside. I know it feels like I'm experiencing something outside, but it must be inside. It can't be both places. And if I only have access to inside experiences, and I classify some of it as some kind of reference to an outside, then I only have the reference. I don't have the actual outside. How could it possibly be that it was the actual outside? It can't be, right? It's completely impossible, right?
And if you were to say to a kid, let's say he's 3, right? And you were to say to the kid, I'm going to give you some candy. And then you gave the kid a picture of some candy, he would say, that's not real candy. That's just a picture of a candy. Right? If you were to say, I'm going to give you a chocolate, and then you were to wrap a piece of wood in chocolate wrapper, and you were to give him that piece of wood in chocolate wrapper, and he were to unwrap it, even though it had the wrapping of chocolate and maybe felt a little like chocolate before you opened it, he would open it and he would say, that's not real chocolate. Children have dreams. I remember asking my daughter when she was very young, did you have a dream last night? And she told me what her dream was, and I remember dreams from when I was very little. And we have this amazing ability to differentiate between dreams and reality. I'm sure everyone who listens to this has had the experience of having a bad dream, a nightmare maybe, and you wake up and you say, oh, thank goodness that's not true. And then we feel this relief, which we don't feel in the dream because we've woken up and we've transitioned from some terrible scenario where we're being chased by someone with an axe, and we wake up and we're in our bed. And we recognize that it was just a dream. Now, for me, given that babies, toddlers, dogs, and so on can tell the difference between dreams and reality, given that a little kid knows that he couldn't eat a kungri, given that if you're cruel enough to give a kid a picture of a lollipop when you say you're going to give them a lollipop, and the kid's going to say, oh, that's no good. I don't want that. I want a lollipop. I don't want a picture of a lollipop. Like, he's able to tell the difference between the image and the thing. And children are able to tell the difference between dreams and reality, and dogs are able to tell the...
He's just rambling on this thing that he thinks is metaphysics, right? After I tried for an hour to point out that what we're doing now is not metaphysics, pointing out I think there might be a paradox built into this thing, the inside, the outside, and he still doesn't get it. I mean, he keeps rambling on, and this same setup of describing it, I could understand. I mean, if I'm trying to put myself in his mindset, right? He's frustrated that people seem to disregard that they have to eat or something like that, right? It's like, come on, people, listen. It's not that complicated. You have to object stuff in your face, right? Survive, right? Children in books and squirrels can find, but that's not the fucking point, you moron, right? And he thinks he's on the right track. He's just on the completely different track. A different misunderstood track where he thinks he has to argue in a certain way in order to illuminate you about what you are actually doing and could do without even philosophizing. Well, when you philosophize, You think in a structured way. It's a kind of meta thinking, right? And you do it structured so that you don't miss anything or you don't jump to conclusions or anything like that, right? You do it in a structured way so that both you make sure that you don't jump into something you shouldn't jump into. And then people, if you present it in sort of a text fashion or in a podcast or in a whatever speech or anything, people can follow it and they sense that you are working structured and not trying to screw with their mind somehow, right? That's why I keep saying, let's go back to this problem, this foundation, this reduction base, and let's see if we can figure this problem out. And first of all, I need to try to point out that there actually is a problem in your thinking, right? And it's sort of it's what's the word? He is oblivious to it. What's it called? He simply doesn't. It's like I say it and he hasn't heard it. It's like I can't understand, right? So you must be talking about something else. So it's like talking to a tree, and you know, is similarly fruitful, right? And then he has sort of, okay, I can't talk to this guy because he doesn't understand my philosophy, and that must be because there's something wrong with him, right? While it actually him there's something wrong with. And then he sort of mute me, and then he keeps going to you know, solidify this weird philosophy he has, right? So to sort of kill people's ability to think for themselves in another direction than he wants.
Difference between dreams and reality. Now we don't usually we can't tell the difference between dreams and reality while we're dreaming, but the moment we wake up, we say, oh my gosh, that was a dream. And, you know, if we have a dream that we owe someone 10...
But because you're not aware, you're not conscious, right? You're not conscious when you're asleep. And I think, I mean, isn't that what sleeping is about? It's being not unconscious, but it's being aconscious, right? It's sort of dwindling down the energy level, and while you know the sun is gone in the middle of the night, gone, right? I flicked my fingers and the sun disappeared, right? Then you might as well sleep and you know save your energy, and then kick it up in a higher gear if you had to be aware all day long, all 24/7, right? So then you become aconscious, and if there's something going on, you can't philosophize about it because you are not conscious about it, and that means all these cognitive abilities and all sorts of other stuff is sort of switched off while you're sleeping. Who gives a crap about that, right? You can't use that in a philosophical argument because you are not philosophizing about it, right? And when you wake up, you are no longer in a dream, right? You might have a memory of the dream, but that's not the dream, right? There might be something you missed. You can't remember. That happens a lot, right? Sometimes I'm sort of, when I wake up and oh, that's an interesting dream here, and then I know it's sort of fading away. And a couple of seconds or minutes later, I can't remember the dream anymore. It's like it just slips out, right? Sometimes it's so vivid that it sort of stays. Other times it sort of fades away, and you have to let it go, right? So how do you know that you have all the dreams? You don't. You don't give a crap about dreams in philosophy, right? Leave dreams the fuck alone in your philosophy, right? At least in your metaphysics and your epistemology and ethics, for that matter, right?
$1,000. And we wake up. We don't phone everyone and say, wait, did I owe you $10,000? We just say, oh, I dreamed. Now, it may be that we do owe someone $10,000. We forgot about it for some reason. The dream's there to remind us, but, assuming that it was just a dream. So we're really good at being able to differentiate between our subjective experience and objective reality. And in fact, we know for sure that we could not have survived if our ancestors and ourselves had been unable to do that. So
No, but he thinks it's a matter of differentiating about the impression and the idea, right? There's an idea of an elephant and there's an impression of an elephant, to use Hume's terms, right? Or there's the real objective elephant, as he calls it, and then the subjective elephant, which is the idea of an elephant, right? Or some weird idea, a kangaroo or whatever he called it, right? In that book he referenced. But that's not the point in this kind of metaphysics. It's the claim about something being outside your mind, right? Talking about something being independent of your mind or something like along those lines, right? If it's independent of your mind, what is meant by that? Is it that it's sort of kind of spatially outside the mind, right? Because your experience of that, those qualia, they are mounted in this sort of 3D experience, this scaffolding that they're placed in, sounds and colors and whatever, right? In particularly the colors, right? But there's direction to sound and so on, right? The claim that it's an outside independent of your experience, right? That's the problem you have to face, right? Because if it's an independent outside, how the hell do you have access to it, right? You can't say, yeah, I have an experience of it. Okay, but then it's on the inside, right? That experience must be on the inside. So how do you know of anything outside? Where did that insight come from about the outside? Well, I'm just claiming it's an outside. Okay, so you're taking a part of your experience, at least a part of it, if not all of it, and saying it's outside. But then you're merely labeling some part of your experiences as being outside, and after that, you just claim it's also outside. The point is that, which I was attempting to get to, is no, it's still an experience inside, and if you say it's an outside, the outside you do not have access to. It's simply impossible, right? From the axiom you are using that it is an outside, right? If you say it's an outside, it can't be in the mind at the same time. And if it's in the mind, then it's not the outside, right? It's this paradox or contradiction or whatever term you want to use that he seems to be completely unable to fathom, right? And he keeps talking about, if you think of an elephant, it's not an elephant. He thinks that's what I'm trying to say, that there's only thinking of elephant and not a real objective elephant. No, I never said that, right? I'm completely Humean on this. There are impressions and there are ideas, right? And I might use some other terms, but you can think of the elephant, the sort of the weak idea of an elephant, or you can have the impression that is strong and has strong vivacity, to use Hume's terms, right? That's how it works. But both of them are still within your mind, right? Even if you say that impression of elephant is some kind of outside quote thing, right? That experience of that objective elephant, if that's what Stefan Molyneux would call it, is still on the inside of your mind. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that experience, and you wouldn't refer to it, and you would be completely ignorant of it, oblivious to it, right? So in order for you to say there's elephant out there, you must be referring to some experience inside. And if there's only an experience inside that you have access to, whatever might be out there, you do not have access to. You only have that experience of it, right? It's kind of simple. It's just too much, apparently, for him to go so far, right? But my point is, when you're a philosopher, you have to go where your thinking leads you, right? If you've run into a contradiction or paradox like this, you have to find some solution before you go any further, right? That's why I'm trying to pull him back to this question, because he's babbling on about all sorts of weird stuff that is further down the line, down somewhere in epistemology or something like that, right? That's stupid. That says a lot about how ignorant he is of good philosophy.
This idea that everything exists within the mind and it's all this big blur and there's no difference between the internal and the external, there's no difference between the objective and the subjective, that is a luxury
So he's framing completely incorrectly. He thinks that, it's one of those who has this, everything is relative. Everything. It's sort of, if you trigger him about these things, he goes into this autopilot where everybody is thinking this same weird relative way without trying to understand or differentiate between my arguments and other argumenters he has previously encountered, right? Not trying to see there might be something different with this dude, right? But he's just, okay, you're one of those. Okay, now I have to argue this, and I'm going to shout at you until you either accept what I'm saying or I have to mute you, right? So that's ridiculous. That's not even philosophy, right? As I point out, that's just being sort of, hysterical about it, right?
That we indulge in only because other people don't. And I don't like to be parasitical that way. I'm not calling this former debater a parasite or anything like that. I'm just saying I don't like... If the only way that I can indulge in everything's kind of subjective is because other people don't believe that, right? So he's paying his electricity bill, right? So that he can have a computer so that he can talk to me and have a really strenuous debate, which was great. Now, the only reason that the electricity works is because people don't just kind of daydream that they've wired up an electrical grid. They actually...
No, of course they work from their impressions. They don't sit around in the sofa dreaming about the electricity and thinking that their computer might start to work all of a sudden, right? It's fucking ridiculous that you think you have to argue about this. People understand this. You are deranged when it comes to this, right? Of course people understand this. The difference is you think they're talking about the difference between the impression and the idea of something, right? No. What I'm trying to point out, and you need to figure this out if you need to go and be remembered in 500 years, and that is, all of it is inside your mind, and if you're saying it isn't in your mind, then you're wrong. You are referring to something you do not have access to then, right? You are conflating an idea of an outside with an necessary impression on the inside, right? You can't claim it's an outside just by saying it's an outside. In order for you to have any idea that there is something, you need an impression of it, right? If you have that inside-outside dichotomy. And if you need an impression of it in order to have any idea that something outside, then you have an impression version of it at most, right? Then you don't have the real thing out there, or the thing itself, to use Kant's terms, right? That now I've said that like 20, 30 times in this podcast, right? At least you listeners in my channel, I hope you... Now, if you don't understand it, don't just take it. If it penny hasn't dropped for you, it's like, of course, man. How stupid could I be to thinking that I was actually experiencing the actual outside? If that's the kind of insight you feel you have gotten, you're probably on the right track, right? And if you're saying, I guess that could be something, I wondered sometimes about these things, but I'm not really sure what he means, then the penny hasn't dropped yet, right? It's like, it's sort of this mic drop moment when you think, holy fuck, man, I've been stupid, ignorant, and bad at philosophy. And realizing that everybody else around you is still doing what you did incorrectly before, right? And you're sort of one of those 1 in 10,000 people who can actually get past this habitual thinking, right?
You have to go out there, do the difficult, dirty, and dangerous work of wiring up an electrical grid, right? So the only reason that he had...
But in order for them to do that, right, they can't close their eyes, right? They have to open their eyes and listen and follow particular preconceived ideas of what should be done about this and that. And when you see that object, you have an impression of that object, you need to do this. And when you have an impression of that object, you need to combine them this way. And then you push that third object and you wait for that fourth object and talk to that fifth object, right? All of them are verified using empirical impressions, right? So you have to have impressions, you have to have experiences in order to figure out how to do this. And that's what I'm talking about. They have to be on the inside, right? You have to have them inside. Because if you already knew what was out there, why would you need your eyes and your ears and all that? You didn't need an experience if you already know what is out there. But if you have to first have an impression of it on the inside in order to have any idea what is out there, then you only have the impression. Because you don't know about it before it becomes that impression. And then it's no longer whatever thing is out there, right? So it never was any of that. You never had any of that. Right? You never had any experience of that actual outside. Because every time you are experiencing anything, you are having that experience on the inside. Because you need to have it in order to have anything to work with, right? And then you never had the actual outside. If you are jumping into the axiom that some of your experiences might be an outside, right? Okay, I pounded this horse. It's completely fucking dry and flat, right?
As food that powers his mind to have this debate, or anyone for that matter, is because farmers have not just daydreamed about making food, but have actually gone out into the hard, bitter, dangerous, difficult world and spread the manure and rotated their crops and planted the seeds.
It's also annoying that I can't get to... He's alone on framing what I actually is trying to say, which is incorrect. So and I can refute, I can keep saying, no, you are... It's not what I'm trying to say. You're talking of something that we need to do a lot of philosophy before we get to talk about these things that you're talking about now, right? A lot of things has to be settled before we do this kind of thing. That's why you do metaphysics, right? So I'm annoyed that I can't get that he can sit there and tell everybody what I'm thinking or what I'm saying or the argument I'm trying to present, which is incorrect, right? That's annoying. That's a shitty way of treating people, right? Mr. Art of the Argument and Mr. Virtue, right?
And harvested and, and cooked or transferred it to people who cook it into bread or whatever. So all of these people have to deal with the real world to provide you the food and the shelter and the...
As I said before, it is incredible that he actually thinks that he needs to explain this to people, right? As I said, he must be thinking, what the hell is wrong with people, right? Why do I have to explain to them that thinking about food is not going to make you full, right? Why do I have to keep saying that you have to build a rocket to go to the moon, or you have to build some, power station using your objective in order to get electricity? It's like, what? Might it occur to you that you are on the wrong page, right? That you're actually arguing on something that everybody understands. It's you that don't understand the built-in problem in your argumentation, and therefore you think it's some other problem, and that's what you're arguing against, right? You have sort of self-strawmanned yourself, right? You're creating your own strawman about what other people are trying to argue, and then you're trying to pull that down, right? That's why it feels so possibly strange for you that you sort of, what the hell are these people talking about? Are they fucking crazy? No, they're not. Some of them might be, right? But it's because you don't identify this problem. It's very simple, actually. And if the penny dropped, right, and you were silent for a couple of weeks because you realized that everything you have been talking about in philosophy could possibly be incorrect, for 15 years, that would be some, a bit of a blowback, right? But you have to realize that I have to go where the philosophy leads me, right? Which is sort of the mantra of the good philosopher.
And the drink and so on, for you to say there's no such thing as objective, whatever, right? And
there's no such thing as objective, you fucking piece of shit, to be quite frank. We never even got to epistemology because I was talking about metaphysics, right? In my opinion, objectivity is something you settle when you have settled knowledge, right? Then you start to talk with other people about, can we agree on some objectivity about this, right? But in order to get to objectivity, you need to have an understanding of knowledge. And you have to agree with other individuals about that understanding. Otherwise, you are talking about different things when you're talking about objectivity, right? So don't fucking tell me that I don't know the difference between subjectivity and objectivity, or at least I have a decent philosophy about it, right? Don't fucking tell your minions that I'm a fucking idiot, right? Please.
And I think I'm not calling this guy because I don't really know him that well, but in general.
You don't know him that well? What do you mean, that well? Did you have any idea about me before this call-in show? I would love to know. Does he know who I am? Because it didn't sound like it when I was by chance dropping into Telegram and sort of, oh, there's a podcast. Oh, he started to mention my name. I said, okay, I don't give a fuck. Let's go talk metaphysics, right? Does he know about me? Well, who cares, right? It's just, this loose framing of it, right?
I find that perspective extraordinarily dishonest.
Dishonest? What the hell do you know about my honesty, right? So now he's creating a straw man again, right? He's generating his own straw man so he can pull people down using a straw man, right? It's ridiculous, man. He talked about, oh, you're straw manning me. Oh, you're moving the goalpost. Oh, you're fucking whatever, right? Oh, it's disgusting, right? Oh, see, no, it's not necessarily about this guy. But these kinds of arguments are dishonest. So he's implicitly saying that I'm dishonest. I'm trying to lie and put all sorts of weird, strange ideas into his head because I'm just like to do that because I'm sort of a weird person. Edgelord, right? Suck on this, man, right?
Because if the only reason that you're able to make to make the argument that there's no difference between subjective and objective is because other people have fully differentiated between subjective and objective, then you are arguing using the very tools and survival that is given to you by people who've acted in the complete opposite of your argument. And that's why, to me, also, if you're in a situation, and this is in general, right? This is why it gets a little frustrating at times. I hope I wasn't too frustrated, but because I really enjoyed the debate.
Oh, really? You enjoyed? So that's what it's about? You enjoying a debate? Oh, it was joyful. Yes, I had to mute him, but I enjoyed it, right? Fuck off, man, right? Fuck you, man. It's dripping with sort of gaslighting and passive aggressiveness. All these things that he's sort of projecting on everybody else, right? He's so good at, pinpointing that, oh, you're strawman, oh, you're passive aggressive, oh, I think he's both told me I was moving the goalpost, I was creating strawmen, I was passive aggressive, and I was fucking the debate, or I was misrepresenting him, I've been lying, and I mean, it's like, it's endless, accusations. But he enjoyed the debate. Oh man, the biggest philosophical asshole on this fucking planet, right? Please tell me where there's a worse philosopher than this dude, right? Holy shit, man, he's bad, right?
But if you have trouble with simple questions like, can you live without eating?
I'm not going to comment again.
And again, a 3 or 4 year old could probably answer that question, right? Now, to me, if a 3 or 4 year old can answer a question correctly, then philosophy should figure out how they can do that.
Okay, let's take this thing, right? How do you know about eating? Right? Now let's be empirical about it, right? You're Mr. Empiricism and objectivity and all that shit. Okay, let's do it, right? What does it mean to eat? If it's empirical, your observation, if you say that it's an observation and you have seen people eat and so on, you need to experience it empirically, right? Okay, so if something is empirical, that's a skeptical claim about knowledge, which means the only way to knowledge is through what you call sense data, right? So sense data is either a color, a sound, a taste, a feel, or a smell, right? Okay, so if you say eating is objective, I guess that's the term you use, right? That means it's empirically objective. That means it must have one of these qualia, right? So what color does eating have? What sound does eating have? What taste does eating have? What smell does it have? And what feel does it have? Well, to the best of my understanding, it has nothing of these, right? So eating cannot be empirical. That means, according to your standards, it can't be objective. So what the fuck are you talking about, right? It's an interpretation of what goes on, right? Objects moving around in certain patterns that you apparently recognize as eating, and therefore you think that the interpretation of what is going on is also objective, right? No, it can't be objective because it can't be empirical, right? So I refuted your stupid argument. You don't know what you are talking about, right? Because you haven't done the sufficient thinking in order to classify these things. And that's why I keep telling you, you should do some decent metaphysics, right? Instead of spouting all this bullshit and, attacking your callers. What the fuck are you? What kind of person are you, man?
It shouldn't just say, well, that's like a 3-year-old saying that the world is flat and they just don't know. And then it's like, no, if both a 3-year-old and a postdoctorate PhD in biology both answer it the same way, it's probably pretty close to true. So if you're having trouble with a question like, can you eat the dream of food? Right? Do you need actual food
And he keeps pounding the same point again and again and again. He keeps repeating the same point, maybe in a slightly different setting or manner, or, using different words or examples or analogies or metaphors or whatever, right? But he's trying to say the same thing, and he's been doing that for 15 years in all sort of convoluted fashions without maybe realizing I might just have gotten something wrong, right? The idea that he might have gotten something fundamentally wrong in his philosophy is not a part of his thinking, right? And the more he has cornered himself, or painted himself into a corner by publishing books and publishing speeches and publishing podcasts and whatever he's been publishing, makes all those timestamps that says, this is my philosophy, this is my philosophy, this is my philosophy, all through the last 15 years, is sort of making sure that he stays in this corner and he can never get out of it, right? Otherwise, he will have to refute and go back minutely deciphering everything he's been written and saying in all his 2 million podcasts, whether or not he's violating this actual problem, right? He's never going to do that. So he's going to be remembered in rest of human history as the idiot who didn't understand this problem, even when people fucking threw it in his face. Right? Actually, let him stay there. Nobody, why am I, it just occurred to me, why am I bothering, right? Wouldn't I want him to stay there looking like an idiot rather than trying to help him get to the next level, right? Why not let him be an idiot, right? Why I'm trying to save him from himself, right? Maybe what my problem is that he is so sophistically good that he can make sure that other people are staying in this bad understanding of philosophy, right? He's sort of claiming, you are supporting philosophy by giving me money, right? Like the priest says, you are supporting God by giving me money, right? Why can God make his own money, right? So stupid, man, right?
In order to survive. Like, if that causes you to hesitate, if that causes you to, well, it's complicated, it's like, no, that's not complicated. And if you've lived your whole life, like he was talking about driving, right? So I'll pick on him for this one, right? So if you're driving and you say, well, first of all, you're driving because you can't will yourself to your destination, right? Like, if you're daydreaming, I can daydream about a vacation.
Well, I will hesitate, I guess, that saying, even those who claim that they can will themselves to go somewhere, they're all also driving cars, right? You're pounding the same problem that you're thinking you are refuting. You're talking about something completely different because you kept misunderstanding whatever I told you or wanted to talk about. And you all ask these weird, aggressive questions that, throws you up against the wall and say, if I say this, how is he going to manipulate? If you say that, sort of you get back and afraid that he's going to frame you in some way that is going to make you look ridiculous, and you can't get out of it by using decent philosophical arguments, right? And now he thinks he's cracked it, right? I never talked about you not being objective about things, right? But I'm not going to just talk about objectivity if I'm not done the necessary metaphysics. I've done it, but in our discourse there, we hadn't done it, right? And if we need to understand where we both are, we need to start from the starting point and move all the way up until we get to the point where I think we need to talk about objectivity. And I'm happy to present my idea of what I mean by subjective and what I mean by objective, and also what I mean by true and by knowledge and all these things. I'd be happy to, but it was not a part of that discussion we needed to get back to so we could actually get to that point, right? So, and that's why the answers I presented were sort of, but that's not what I don't want to talk about that. You're too far down the road, right? We have to get back to the basics, right? And then you think, oh, he's trying to get away from my fantastic questions, right? Can you survive by thinking about food, right? My God, it's such a good question. Oh, I'm the best philosopher, right? Oh, I'm good, man. I found the Holy Grail, man, right?
That I had when I was 10. And then I can daydream about a vacation that I had when I was 40. And then I can daydream about vacationing on the moon. Now, I don't need to drive to these places. I don't need to fly to the moon. In my mind, I can go to all of these places. And of course, I've done this very vividly. I mean,
I know
I'm one of the few
philosophers
who has worked very deeply and very seriously in the artistic realm, right? So I've created entire fictional worlds with characters, with locations, with economies. Like, really, I've done this in Dungeons and Dragons. I've done this in novel writing.
That's also a sort of a weird thing, right? If you're good at creating fantasy worlds, why are you so hung up on this objectivity, right? Is this a sort of a letting out steam about your fantasies and your subjectivity that needs to be channeled out through fiction? Because I don't care about fiction writing, right? I am always been sort of fond of natural sciences, right? I have slowed it down quite a bit since it's sort of. I was in a situation, just to talk a bit about that, where I was good at it, but that didn't necessarily mean that should be my life's work, right? But that's just when you're young and forced into this and forced into that, you just, if the teacher says, oh, he's very good at chemistry, for instance, oh, so he has to go to whatever, right? It's like if you like cooking at home as a child or a young person, that doesn't necessarily mean you should be a cook, right? It's a different thing to be a cook than to, or girls to think just because they like their little puppy that they should be, vets or something like that, right? It's a different thing to stick needles into somebody else's dog, right? You don't care about that fucking dog, right? So it is the thing about finding finding your passion is an important aspect of growing up, in my opinion. Finding your passion, and I guess it changes all through life, right? Your passions might be change a bit or be narrowed down, or whatever can happen, right? But there might be something that it's hard to pin down, because it's not a trade or anything like that. That's not the passion that drives the thing, right? Just like Hume talks about, right? It's passion that is behind whatever you do. There's some kind of passion behind it that makes you want to go somewhere, do something, right? And that's the passion you have to dig down and find in order to have a good life, in my opinion, right? So, or at least your own personal life. When it gets to, relationship with other people, there's some other aspects. But people who are not looking for their passion, they're not compatible with people who are looking for their passion, right? So,
I've written 30 plays, I've written hundreds of poems, so I've worked really hard in waking dreams. And I have to believe in the worlds that I'm creating to such a degree that they really come alive to the audience. I have to really invest and create these worlds that really come alive to the audience. But they're not real. They're fiction.
They come alive. It's alive. It's alive. So it comes alive. Is that he's sort of fogging that boundary between if it comes alive? It's almost like it's real, right? But it's still fictional, right? He is a weirdo, right? He's a very articulate, but he's a weirdo.
So I'm always concerned, I think, when somebody says, when I'm driving, ... and they say, well, there's no difference between the objective and the subjective or everything.
Of course there is. That's why you differentiate, right? Now, don't tell your people that I don't know a difference between subjective and objective. I refuse to go into a debate about that, except you used it to differentiate things very early on in metaphysics, which I think is a freak, right? You don't talk about objective and subjective because objective inherently refers to some kind of object. That's why it's called objective, in my opinion, or at least it makes sense to use the term that way, right? But objects are something you identify in your experience, right? That's somewhere down the line of epistemology, and that's not what we are talking about. We are talking about metaphysics. I said that from the beginning, right? And he said he will be happy to talk about metaphysics, right? So he doesn't understand when we are talking about this metaphysics or epistemology, right? He doesn't know there's a difference, or he doesn't care if it's one or the other. He's mixing it together, right? He doesn't like to keep things strict in a ordered manner, right? And that's a bad sign. If you're not strict about how you argue through things, you are a lousy philosopher, right?
Thing occurs within your mind and you can't tell them apart in any real way. Okay, but then why are you driving somewhere? Because I can visit imaginary worlds. I can visit memories. I can visit different places that I've been in my mind. I can think back upon the 3 big documentaries that I've done in Poland and in Hong Kong and in California. You can find these at freedomain.com/documentaries. You should really watch them. I think they're very good. But so I can daydream about these things and I don't need to drive anywhere. The moment you say I've got to drive somewhere, you're in a different state of mind. Like if I were to say to my wife, I want to look at photos of our wedding, therefore we need to go to the place we were married, she'd say, well, what are you talking about? We don't need to go to the place we were married in order to look at photos of our wedding. Now, if I were to say, I want to look at the location of the wedding, I want to look at the location of where we were married, then of course, we would have to go there to the actual physical location, right? So if somebody says, I had to drive somewhere, then they're accepting that they can't get there in their mind, that they actually have to move their body through some objective medium. They also have to say, and the car is built by people who didn't daydream about having a car or who fully and completely understood the difference between subjective and objective. That's the only reason you have a car that works. It's the only reason you have gasoline. It's the only reason the gasoline works.
Clearly, there's a difference between what he understands as objective and what objective subjective than what I call objective and subjective. You need to be aware of that, right? So that's also a problem, that we are using the same terms but for different things. And I'm not going to give up my terms in order to, fit to his philosophy. I mean, I can understand what he's saying, but then I would try to use some other words to describe that deeper metaphysics, where he uses this objective and the subjective, right? But I suppose that he uses this all over the place, objective and subjective. It's just some two magic words that explains everything, apparently, right? Because he's possibly also going to use it in epistemology, right? And as far as I remember, he talks a lot about objectivity and subjectivity in ethics also, right? So it's just these two magic words that are everywhere in this fucking philosophy, right?
Science and people studying these things and engineers and so on. So if everything that you do to survive and flourish and do anything in this world requires a very clear distinction between the subjective and the objective, then you need to figure out how you're doing it and how everyone else does it and how everyone who grows your food and everyone who designs your car and everyone who delivers your electricity and your water, how they all do it. Now, that's a very interesting philosophical question, and one, of course, that I've been working on for decades. Now, just to say, well, everything occurs within your mind and it's all subjective to one degree or another.
What have you been working on for decades? Is the question whether or not thinking of a car and driving a car, the difference between it, have you been thinking for decades about that? And you have, now I'm confused. What is he saying? Decades before he started, he figured it out before he started his philosophy show, and then he's been pounding on it for 15 years. Or is he still thinking about it, right? Because he seems very cocksure about how to understand this. I'm just a bit confused now, right?
Or whatever, right? There's no difference between subjective and objective. It's like, okay, then you need to stop paying for food. Because it's much more efficient to daydream about eating than it is to...
Yeah, but you keep pounding this. I'm muted him now. So I have to talk to him through my own video here, right? As I pointed out, he's talking about something else that I'm talking about. He doesn't identify the actual problem I wanted to get to. So he keeps talking about this as if this is what I was talking about. It isn't. This is completely settled with me. I don't need to do this kind of philosophy he's talking about here. It's all fixed, right? I know when I'm driving a car and when I'm thinking of a car, right? I know when I'm dreaming of a chocolate cake and when I'm eating a chocolate cake, right? I know the difference, right? I can handle the shit, right? And as I said, him thinking that he needs to explain this, it must be weird in his mind, as I said, and sort of, again, I need to explain these very simple things that people don't seem to understand. They're crazy, right? It's like, and it's because that he's on the wrong path, right?
Actually go and eat. Going to eat is expensive, it's time-consuming, blah, 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 right? So if it's much more efficient to daydream about eating, why did we develop physical dangerous agriculture? Right? So everything that we have done to survive and flourish as a species is based upon a clear distinction between the subjective and the objective. Science, engineering, medicine, mathematics, biology, geography. Right? That there's different spaces in the world, different places in the world, different countries in the world that aren't one big blob. And, anthropology, you have to travel to go, right? So we are very good from very early on. Like object constancy, you can get at a couple of months. Like the ball rolls behind the couch and the kid doesn't think it just disappears, but knows that it's still behind the couch. Object constancy.
Hang on, mister. Mister, that's Danish. Hang on, mate, right? Object constancy? Let's have that again.
Science, engineering, medicine, mathematics, biology, geography. Right, that there's different spaces in the world, different places in the world, different countries in the world that aren't one big blob. And, anthropology, you have to travel to go, right? So we are very good from very early on. Like object constancy, you can get at a couple of months. Like the ball rolls behind the couch and the kid doesn't think it just disappears, but knows that it's still behind the couch.
It knows it's still behind it. How the hell does it know? What's the difference? You say there's no difference between me experiencing, having an objective experience of ball and seeing the ball disappear under the sofa, right? And then not having an experience of ball, that is still knowledge of ball, right? There's no difference between experiencing ball and not experiencing ball in this case. That's some fucking stupid philosophy, right? If you're not experiencing that ball, you don't know ball, right? Yes, I agree with you. The reasoning is based on prior experiences that there probably still is a ball under the sofa. But the difference is, and I pointed this out very clearly to you, you don't know it. Because if you're limiting yourself by empiricism, you need to have those fucking empirical data in order to claim that knowledge. And if you don't, you do not have knowledge, right? It's just a fact of the definition. Otherwise, you need to make a better or different definition that can encompass that somehow, right? You are violating your own definition of knowledge here, right? It's stupid.
The constancy comes pretty early. Now, object constancy is if the ball rolls under the couch. When the baby's very young, the baby will just lose interest because the ball is out of sight, out of mind, right? But relatively early.
Out of sight, out of mind. So if it's out of mind, you can still have knowledge when it's out of mind? If it's out of mind, I know it's a saying, it's not philosophy, you're referring to a general saying, but still, you're using the term, right? If it's out of mind, can you know it when it's out of mind? If you don't see it, then it's out of mind, but then you have to see it in order for it to be in the mind. And if it's in the mind, is it then outside? Right? You are actually pointing, you're indicating the problem I'm trying to point you to, right? Without even fucking realizing it, right?
Relatively quickly, the child, and this is at a couple of months, will reach under the couch to get the ball. And they know the ball still exists, even though it's no longer impressing itself on their senses. And they're right.
There he just said that he's not an empiricist, right? The child knows it, even when it doesn't impress it on himself. He just said recently, every time he's talking about knowledge, it has to be empirical and it has to be impressions, right? He might have used different terms, but you know what I mean. And now he's saying the child knows without having those impressions, right? How the hell does that work? There are two ways of having knowledge. You can have knowledge. You can only have knowledge when you have that impression. And by the way, you can also have knowledge when there's no impressions. How does that work? You can't have it both ways, man, right? This is the problem in epistemology. You haven't identified either, right?
And they're correct. Right? The ball rolls under the couch, and
they're correct. That's not an argument. They're correct, but not an argument, man, right?
Do this too. The ball rolls under the couch. They will whine and scratch at the couch to try and get the ball because they know that even though they can't see the ball,
they know. What do they know? Right? They expect there to be a ball. That's why they reach in order to get the ball. They want to have some kind of experience of the ball, right? They want to have empiricism. They're not just saying, hey, there's a ball. No. They want to feel it. They want to see it, right? Make sure that it's there, right?
Ball is still there, right? Dogs do it. Bees do it. Even educated fleas do it, right? So animals are really good at...
Let's do it. Let's fall in love. That's Cole Porter, right? Good old song.
Developing concepts or abstractions, in a sense, beyond immediate sense data. And the higher and more advanced the animal, the more it's able to extrapolate to actual scientific concepts in the case of humanity and so on. So we're only alive, we could only have this conversation, and he and I only had this debate. So he wasn't debating with himself, he was debating with me, which meant that he accepted another consciousness outside of his own. Now, I would say at the beginning, he was really talking over me a lot. And listen, I know that people say, well, Stefan, you...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I want to dominate him, right? Oh, I was talking over him. Yeah. He sort of... I don't want... Yeah, I had that discussion about how he behaved in the beginning, right? And all through the thing here, right?
Sometimes we'll talk over other people, but if they've completely mischaracterized my argument, I have to interrupt.
But then you can just interrupt and say they are mischaracterized, right? Then you control the narrative. You're saying, well, I'm interrupting you because you're misrepresenting me, right? You can always say that, right? This is stupid.
Because we're not talking about the same thing at all.
Now, that's for sure, right? Please elaborate on that.
Right, like if I say to a friend of mine, let's go to Kingston, which is...
Jamaica, man.
A town in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
And he thinks we're going to Kingston Town in Jamaica, and he starts making plans for Kingston Town, and he says, hey, man, I've got us really cheap flights to Kingston Town, or Kingston, Jamaica. And I say, no, Kingston, Ontario. I mean, am I interrupting him? No, because we're not talking about the same thing, right? So if some...
Oh, maybe that was what I was trying to do, right? That was what I was trying to do. I was trying to say, no. You're talking about something different and then you were saying, no, I'm keep saying, until I sort of, okay, get in your way, right? It's your show. No, you're passive aggressive, right? That was what I was trying to do. I was saying, no, you got it wrong. Don't go to Ontario. Go to Jamaica, man, right? No, Ontario. I'm Ontario. Shut up, right?
Somebody is misrepresenting my argument or hasn't been listening or is mischaracterizing what I'm saying.
He's stating exactly what I was trying to do. And then he framed it as if I was trying to stop him from... He was explaining what I was trying to explain, right? And he framed it incorrectly and was trying to stop him, say, no, that's where we need to go, right? And so it's like, no. He wanted to... It's like, oh, man, right? That we need to sit and discuss bullshit like this in one of the most important and deepest philosophical discussions you can have. He has derailed it, right? He has deliberately destroyed this conversation because he doesn't give a shit, right? He doesn't give a shit about good philosophy. He needs to protect his freaking stupid business model, right? That's what it's about. This is not about good debates or getting to any insights, anything like that. It's me, and I need to keep going in this shit because I'll never get a job anywhere else. So you need to keep sitting there talking, right? So, and nobody's going to destroy his philosophy, right?
I have to interrupt because there's not actually a debate that's happening as yet, right? Because you have to understand each other's position in order to have a debate. So to me, that's a different matter.
Oh, and that was what I was trying to say to him. You do not understand my position. And I kept saying it, right? He didn't care. So he's trying to tell me about that which I was trying to do to him that he didn't understand, right? I mean, this is such a freaky, weird kind of experience to have with this dude, right? Mr. Philosophy, right? Oh man, I'm so great.
But at the very beginning, I had to assert, and it's funny, it was kind of the way this mechanics worked out. At the very beginning, I had to assert my sovereign consciousness to say, look, you can't talk over me. I have a preference that is different from yours. His preference was to just talk over me.
Oh man, right? Oh, talk shit while you can't defend yourself, right? It's so pathetic, right? He has no fucking balls, right? He has no spine of any kind. He has to mute the other person and then talk about them and tell everybody how stupid they are, right? Fucking piece of shit, man.
And my preference was to not be talked over, because that's kind of rude. And also, if I ask somebody a simple question and they won't answer it, I will repeat the question, because I just filibustering it that.
Well, I didn't ask him to give me some questions, right? That was not what I asked for when I started this debate, or he, asked me basically to start the debate, right? I didn't say, will you please give me some questions I can answer? No. So this kind of, East German Stasi methods, right? Answer this fucking question. Sit on your hands and answer my question. I don't like that, right? I don't like to be pushed up against the wall by this piece of shit, right? Who doesn't know how to do philosophy. Give me a fucking break, man, you moron, right? You don't know shit about what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. You're laughing stock, right?
That way, it's just, I don't know, this is terrible. It's just, and it's not the mark of clear thinking and so on. Not everything's that complicated in this life, right? So at the beginning, he accepted, although he didn't really like it, he accepted this, like, let's not talk over each other. And he called on me on it once or twice, which is perfectly fair. And so he accepted that I had rules that were different from what he was doing. He accepted those rules and accepted me as an external consciousness. Now, have you ever had a debate with yourself where you have to say to you...
So now I am he thinks that I'm trying to say that he doesn't exist, that he's just inside my mind only? No. But because we never got to do any decent metaphysics, we never got to the point where I would be decently able to explain what I would mean by something outside, right? And how I would classify that, being aware of this inherent problem that seems to creep up in all these physicalist metaphysics, right?
Yourself, stop yelling over me. No. I mean, you may have difficulties negotiating with yourself or debating with yourself, but being yelled over is not one of them, I assume, right? Unless it's really vivid, I suppose.
Yeah, and then sort of 40 minutes in, he started to yell at me, right? Like, just kept yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling, right? And they said, yeah, no, I'm just passionate, Yeah, I'm sort of a pathetic loser who has to gaslight you into saying, no, I was not yelling. I was just passionate, right? Oh.
So he accepted that we had an objective medium of communication. He accepted...
objective medium? What is he talking about, right? There's a sound on his screen that he interprets in a certain way. What makes it objective? Is it that it's these sense data, right? Okay, but he has to have them inside his mind in order to experience them, right? The sound is not out there. The color is not out there, right? The taste is not out there. It's in your mind, right? If you don't have a mind, you can't have a taste or a color or anything like that, right? I would presume, right? So it's not because if you don't have a mind, there isn't a mind that it can get to something like that. But now that's the wrong way to put it, right? It's everything you experience has to be in your mind, otherwise you wouldn't have the experience, as I keep saying, right? And he can't differentiate between it being an experience inside your mind if he's also working from that idea of that independent objectivity outside his mind, right? The experience is just going on the inside of that mind thing, right? And he just classifies it as being objective and all these things that he claims. Fine, he has his way of clarifying it. I can't tell him how he should, what words he should use, But he should be, if he wants to debate with people, he has to do it wisely, you could say, at least, right? Not to confuse people too much about his terms and so on, right? And that he doesn't do very well, in my opinion, right? But then it's this problem that that outside he's referring to is still an inside he's referring to, right? There's no problem in that. And you could say that, then what does it matter then? Whether it's inside or outside, it's still the same thing I'm referring to. I'm still driving my car the same way, eating tomatoes, even though it's still on the inside. Yes, the problem arrives later in your philosophy. If you were only going to do this kind of philosophy, okay, it wouldn't matter. But I tell you, it matters when you get down the road, right? When you get to epistemology, you get to ethics, it matters a whole fucking lot, right? It's actually night and day, right? Okay.
That words have meaning, that sound exists and is valid. He accepted that I have a consciousness outside his own consciousness. And then he said everything.
He's just strawman after strawman after strawman, right? I know it's because he doesn't understand what I'm saying, which he said was what you should aspire to, which he didn't do, right? But it's one strawman after the other he's trying to pull down and say, wow, I fixed it, right?
Thing is in my own brain. Well, then why would he call up someone to have a debate? Did you understand? That would be like me driving.
I understand the argument, but that's not what I'm talking about, right? So,
to a place I want to visit only in my imagination. Why would you call up someone to have a debate if you didn't accept that they existed as a sovereign consciousness? And that's part of when you slow down debates and you look at what's occurring in the debate. This is one of the things that happens in UPB as well. When you slow down the debate and you say, okay, what's happening in the debate? What needs to be accepted in order for this debate to even exist? What needs to be accepted in order for the debate?
Can a debate exist? Be particular about this and this thing, existence, right? Because that's what he was talking about. It's about existence. What is existence? Or how do I know about existence? Something like that, right? Okay, so a debate exists, right? Okay, if it exists, it has to be knowledge, right? Of some kind. It has to be empirical, as he says, right? Okay, empirical means sense data. Okay, there are 5 senses. It's a color, it's a taste, and so on, right? A debate, what color does a debate have? What sound does it have? You could say there are sounds, but they're not necessarily debates just because you have some sounds, right? So does it have a sound? Are you actually referring to something? I would say, personally, in my philosophy, if you can't refer to a color, it's actually enough to refer to a color. You can also refer, but if there's not a color among it, you can say clearly, yes, it has a color. Then it's not an object. Right? It's not an object if you can't refer to a color, right? Because I think the color needs to be there in sort of this 3-dimensional scaffolding inside the mind that the cognitive abilities need in order to cognize various objects in the experience, right? So if there's no color, it's not an object, right? So if the debate doesn't have a color, it's not an object, so it can't be objective, right? So fuck you, man, right? You don't know what you're talking about.
To even exist. Well, 2 consciousnesses, some reasonable rules of debate, and so on, right? And so, yeah, so I mean, I thought we got to a very productive place.
And I might add that because he thinks there are so many things that are objective, right? He thinks he knows everything, basically, right? And if people disagree with him, he's sort of, no, I have objectivity, I'm certain. So go fuck you, right? So he's sort of, and that makes him fence himself more and more into, this certainty area that he's sort of hiding in now, right? He can't meet people in I don't know land, right? So it's like, it's this or it's not this, right? Fuck you.
Place, at least for me, where he's like, yeah, there's a difference between daydreaming about food and eating food. Yes, perfect. That was sort of my position from the beginning. So I think it was very positive, very productive.
So it was his position from the beginning? What? It's about eating or what? So it's just the go-to argument. Whenever if you throw the towel in the ring and say metaphysics, he's saying, okay, can you eat without eating? I say, oh man. Oh man, I'm sort of running out of vocabulary about this. Right, it's ending in a minute or two. Right, so it's good that it's almost done now. Right, let's see
And
if he has anything further to say.
yeah, I do. I mean, the reason I fought so hard as well is I think it's dangerous. I think it's a dangerous idea to give people all of this real subjectivity and subjectivism and everything's in your own brain and so on.
Yeah, it's dangerous. Yes, you can't handle the truth, you little peons. Yes, it's dangerous. I have to help the little people, the weaklings. They have to be helped by big philosophy guy who has to fence off these idiots that are trying to stupidify people by making everything relative and you don't know it, right? Oh, yeah. Now, that's the trick, right? It's making people make them feel small. So they come running to him and say, "Oh, save us, Mr. Big Guy, Holy Grail Finder, the Grail Finder, right? Help me, I give you money and you will save me from the big bad wolf of relativity is coming to eat me. Yes, you have frightened me into submission." Right?
And I think it isolates people. And I think it's not healthy at all for the mind to believe that, to not have act.
It's not a fucking belief, right? It's not a fucking belief. It's philosophy. Stick your belief where the sun don't shine or give it to your Christian friends, right? It's not a fucking belief. Don't use that word in my discussion, right, about me. Don't frame me as some kind of belief.
Access to objective and empirical reality, I think is very, 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 very bad. Okay, so thanks everyone so much. Have yourself a wonderful evening. I appreciate that. So let's see here. What is it? I'm sorry, I'm just curious what people are saying about the debate. Let's see here. Somebody says, Steph, it seems more like it was an argument on the foundation of the meaning of words or language than it was objective reality itself. He had way too many logical inconsistencies and contradictions. But my question is, isn't the claim that reality is subjective also an objective claim? Well, yeah, of course. And that's why he was telling me that I was wrong, that I might...
This illuminates the level of philosophy skills of his fan space, right? They don't know what the fuck they're talking about, right? But fine. As I said in the last part, let them all flock to this idiot, right? And then we know where they are. Well, if you want idiot philosopher and philosophy, go to the free domain. That's where they are. Let him drag all the idiots down there, right? And so we know where they are. We don't have to go there, right? Don't go down there, right?
My arguments contain paradox. And then when I tried to prove things that I was right, he said, "Oh, that's epistemology, not metaphysics." And it's like, no, that's not. But see, here's the thing: subjectivity is a way of not having to obey objective rules. And so,
holy shit! A lot of crap he fired there. I pointed out there might be a paradox. He ignored it, and then I said, "Well, when you're talking about things and you're using terms like true, I find it to be a part of epistemology and not metaphysics." He's just weird because he's subjectivity guy, right? So I'm just, oh, god damn, it's ugly, right?
I need to eat stuff. I need to stuff my face to sustain my existence. Yeah, that's true. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone. freedomain.com/donate to help out the show. Please don't forget to.
Then he goes into the chat to see are they abiding to are they submitting themselves to my rhetoric, right? So, yeah. Oh, we all agree. Yeah, they're stupid idiots. We got rid of them. Yeah, let's get back to, objective reality and these, right? Oh. Okay, this is the end of part 5 and the end of the deconstruction of my experiences being on the free domain philosophy show. And also, yes, he calls it the free domain metaphysics debate. Okay, as if it was something that was planned and I was sort of invited on the show or something. And the big debate we had, sort of, no, it was just, I dropped into the discussion, and now it's being framed as the big, it doesn't say, but the free domain physics debate, as if he's referring to something that is established already. But it's the free domain metaphysics debate. It's not Stefan and Mandibil's metaphysics debate, so he could sort of let me be a part of it. No. It's the free domain metaphysics debate, right? He's basically saying he's debating with himself, right? I'm debating with free domain here, right? Oh, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Oh, I mean, I don't want to get deeper into this. I think I've said what I need to say about this. I've spent like 6 or 7 hours deconstructing it, right? And it deserves to be deconstructed. I am not going to leave that alone, right? And I think I've done a decent job, right? So let me have your comments and your ideas and, your opinions about what was going on here, and any kind of thought you have along these lines. I would love to hear it. Just looked like somebody was knocking on the door, but not at all. Right? So yes, I'm happy to have it out of my system now, and I'm heading back to reality. Right? I had to stuff my face, right? I'm making a Greek salad, and I'm going to use my impressions to make it. Right? See you later. Oh yeah, check out the Discord link below. Right? See you later.